parents chose my brother's birthday over my son's in the ICU. Now, they came back begging, but I gave them a lesson they'll never forget. I'm a 38-year-old male and run my own contracting company that specializes in commercial renovations. I've been in business for 11 years now, and it wasn't an easy road getting here. My childhood was basically a masterclass in how to raise one kid while clearly favoring another. I was the responsible one, the one who got straight A's, played varsity baseball, and worked part-time jobs since I was 15. Meanwhile, my younger brother, Pete, a 33-year-old male, got praised for managing to put his own shoes on. I'm not exaggerating much here. Dad was an electrical engineer who made decent money, but he was the kind of guy who thought showing emotion meant you weren't a real man. Mom taught elementary school and had endless patience for Pete's screw-ups, but somehow none for mine. I remember bringing home a report card with all A's and 1 B+, and Mom asked what happened with the B+. Pete would bring home C's and D's, and they'd take him out for ice cream as a reward for trying. I moved out at 18, put myself through community college while doing construction work, then transferred to Indiana University to finish my business degree. I worked 80-hour weeks, splitting time between job sites during the day and classes at night, never asking my parents for a dime. By 27, I'd saved enough to start my own contracting business, small jobs at first, renovating bathrooms, building decks, that kind of thing. Gradually, I built a reputation for quality and fair pricing, started getting bigger projects, office renovations, restaurant build-outs, retail spaces. I met Lauren when I was hired to renovate the dental office where she worked as a hygienist. She was smart, no nonsense, and had this laugh that could light up a room. We got married when I was 30, had our son, Lucas, a year later. Life was good, business was growing. We bought a house in a decent neighborhood with good schools. I was working hard but making it home for dinner most nights. Then, at 34, everything shattered. Lauren was driving home from work when some idiot ran a red light going 70 in a 35. She died on impact. Police said she probably never knew what hit her. 1 minute, I'm a happily married father and business owner. The next, I'm planning a funeral and trying to explain to a confused 3-year-old why mommy isn't coming home. The first few weeks were a blur. I remember sitting on Lucas's bed, night after night, as he cried himself to sleep, asking when mommy was coming back. I'd hold it together until he dozed off, then go downstairs and fall apart. My parents showed up for the funeral, of course. Dad stood awkwardly in his suit, patting my shoulder once and saying, "She was a good woman." Mom hugged me stiffly and spent most of the service fussing over Pete, who was so upset by his sister-in-law's death that he needed constant attention. They stayed for the reception at our house, then announced they had to get back because Pete needed help moving into his new apartment, the one my dad co-signed for because Pete's credit was shot from maxing out multiple credit cards. I didn't even get a casserole from them. Not a single call to check on Lucas or me in the weeks that followed. No offers to watch Lucas so I could catch up on work, or, I don't know, grieve my wife in peace for an hour. Lauren's mom, Beth, though. She flew in from Portland the day after the accident and stayed for 3 months. She was 65 and had arthritis that made every movement painful. But she got up with Lucas every morning, made his breakfast, took him to preschool, then came home and did laundry or cleaned or made meals that could be frozen for later. She'd sit with me late at night when the silence got too loud, not saying much, just being there. When she finally had to go back to Portland, she was the primary caretaker for her sister with MS. She cried harder than I'd seen since the funeral. She made me promise to call her every day, and she came back every few months to spend time with Lucas. After losing Lauren, I rebuilt our life piece by piece. I hired a part-time nanny who picked Lucas up from preschool and stayed with him until I got home. I rearranged my work schedule to be home by 6 p.m., most days. I learned to cook more than just burgers and pasta. We established new routines, found a new normal. I reached out to my parents occasionally, mostly so Lucas could have some connection with his grandparents. They'd see him maybe once every few months, always on their schedule, usually for an hour or two at a restaurant where they'd spend most of the time on their phones or talking about Pete's latest business idea that just needed a little startup money. So yeah, they've always been a piece of work, narcissists. But what happened 5 years ago is when I finally cut them off for good. It was a morning in April. I remember because I had a big client meeting scheduled for that afternoon, and I was mentally running through my presentation while making Lucas breakfast. He was 6 then, in first grade, obsessed with dinosaurs in space. He was sitting at the counter, eating cereal and telling me about how a T-Rex couldn't actually run fast because of its body weight, something he'd learned from a documentary we'd watched the night before, when he suddenly stopped mid-sentence. His spoon dropped from his hand, clattering against the bowl. I looked up from my coffee to see his eyes roll back. Before I could reach him, he slid off the stool and collapsed on the kitchen floor. His body went rigid, then started convulsing violently. Blood poured from his nose and I realized he'd bitten through his tongue. I'd taken a first aid course after Lauren died. One of those things I did to feel less helpless in a world that had proven just how little control I actually had. I turned him on his side, made sure he wasn't choking, and timed the seizure. When it passed 2 minutes with no sign of stopping, I knew this was bad. I scooped him up, grabbed my keys, and ran to the car. I laid him across the back seat, still seizing, and drove like I was in a high-speed chase, making the 15-minute drive to the hospital in under 7 minutes, blowing through red lights and stop signs. I pulled right up to the emergency entrance, carried him in, and shouted for help. A team of nurses and a doctor rushed over with a gurney. I laid him down, his small body still jerking, blood and foam around his mouth. "How long has he been seizing?" the doctor asked. "About 9 minutes now," I said, checking my watch. They rushed him back immediately, shouting medical terms I didn't understand. A nurse directed me to registration while they took him away. I stood there with his blood on my shirt, mechanically answering questions and filling out forms with shaking hands. 4 hours passed before a doctor came out to talk to me. Dr. Rivera was a woman in her mid-40s with tired eyes and a direct manner. "Mr. Wilson, your son has bacterial meningitis. It's extremely serious. The bacteria have caused inflammation in the membranes around his brain and spinal cord. The seizure was a result of this inflammation. We've started him on powerful antibiotics, but the next 48 hours are critical." She explained they were admitting him to the ICU. The meningitis had progressed rapidly, and they were concerned about increased intracranial pressure, swelling in his brain. If the antibiotics didn't reduce the swelling quickly enough, they might need to perform a procedure to relieve the pressure. I followed as they wheeled Lucas up to the ICU. He was unconscious, hooked up to more machines than I could count. A ventilator was breathing for him. IVs ran into both arms. Monitors beeped steadily, measuring each life function. I sat beside his bed, holding his limp hand, trying to process how we'd gone from dinosaur facts at breakfast to this nightmare in just a few hours. Between talking with doctors and nurses, I made calls to reschedule everything on my calendar. My project manager stepped up to handle the day-to-day stuff. Clients were understanding once I explained the situation, but there was one meeting I couldn't reschedule. After 10 years of building my company, we were about to land a $1.5 million contract renovating a chain of high-end fitness centers. The investors were flying in from Singapore for just this one evening to sign the paperwork and finalize details. The whole deal hinged on me being there from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. My business partner Carl was in Zurich that week meeting with suppliers. I was the only one who could sign off on the final terms. If I missed this meeting, there was a good chance the investors would walk. They had other contractors waiting in line. If we couldn't deliver, this contract would allow me to hire more staff, take on bigger projects, and most importantly, create more financial security for Lucas. After losing Lauren, making sure Lucas was provided for had become my singular focus. I called the head nurse to ask about Lucas's status. "He's stable for now," she said. "The antibiotics are being administered, and we're monitoring his intracranial pressure closely. The neurologist will be doing checks throughout the evening." Then I called my parents. They lived 15 minutes from the hospital, in the same house I'd grown up in. "Mom, it's Dean," I said when she answered. "Lucas is in the ICU with bacterial meningitis. It's really serious. I need you and Dad to come sit with him for just 4 hours tonight while I close this deal. It's critical." "Of course, Dean," she said without hesitation. "We'll be there. Don't worry about Lucas. Focus on your meeting." Hearing her agree so readily sent a wave of relief through me. Despite our complicated relationship, they were Lucas's grandparents. Surely they would step up in an emergency. By 5 p.m. they were at the hospital. Dad nodded at me, his typical stoic greeting. Mom patted Lucas's hand and smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "We've got this," she said. "Go handle your business." I walked them through everything, which doctors were attending, what the nurses had said about watching for signs of increased pressure, when meds were due. I wrote down my client's address and exactly when I expected to be back. "Call me immediately if anything changes," I said. "I mean anything." "Go, Dean," Mom said, settling into the chair beside Lucas's bed. "This is important for your future. We'll call if anything changes." I kissed Lucas's forehead, thanked my parents again, and left for the meeting. I felt like garbage leaving him, but I trusted my parents would stay with him. I believed, despite everything, that they'd do the right thing in a true emergency. The meeting with the Singaporean investors was held at an upscale hotel downtown. Mr. Leong and his team were waiting in the conference room when I arrived, everyone in impeccable suits, while I was still wearing the same clothes from that morning, minus the bloody shirt I'd changed out of at the hospital. "Mr. Wilson," Mr. Leong greeted me with a firm handshake. "We're eager to finalize our partnership." I apologized for my appearance and explained briefly that there had been a family emergency but that I was fully committed to our meeting. Mr. Leong nodded respectfully, and we got down to business. The negotiations went surprisingly well. We reviewed architectural plans, discussed timelines, hammered out final cost details. By 8:30 p.m., they were satisfied with everything and ready to sign the contracts. I instinctively checked my phone and realized I'd put it on silent for the meeting. No missed calls or texts, which I took as a good sign. Lucas must be stable. Mr. Leong caught my glance. "You look concerned, Mr. Wilson. Is everything all right?" I hesitated, not wanting to derail the meeting when we were so close to finishing. "My son's in the ICU. My parents are with him, but—" He raised his hand. "Say no more. Family comes first. We can finish this tomorrow if needed." I was taken aback by his understanding. "Thank you, but I think we're almost done here. Let's finish the paperwork, and then I can get back to him." We signed the contracts within the next 30 minutes. As we shook hands to conclude the deal, Mr. Leong held on to mine for a moment longer than necessary. "Mr. Wilson, my eldest grandson, became very ill when he was young. I missed an important meeting to be with him. That company went with another partner, but my grandson recovered. I have never regretted my choice, even for a moment." His words hit me hard. I thanked him sincerely, grabbed my briefcase, and drove back to the hospital, arriving at 9:10 p.m. When I stepped off the elevator at the ICU, I immediately sensed something was wrong. There was a flurry of activity around Lucas's room. When I walked in, I saw his bed surrounded by a team of nurses and Dr. Rivera. They were adjusting equipment, checking monitors, attaching new IV bags. No sign of my parents. Dr. Rivera looked up, and her face shifted from professional concern to barely contained anger. "Mr. Wilson, where have you been? We've been trying to reach someone for 3 hours. Your son's intracranial pressure spiked dangerously about 2 hours ago." We had to perform an emergency ventriculostomy to relieve the pressure on his brain. A what? My mind raced to catch up. We had to drill a small hole in his skull to insert a drain and reduce the pressure, she explained, seeing my confusion. No one was here to consent. We had to do it under emergency protocol. If we'd waited any longer, he could have suffered permanent brain damage. Or worse. I stood frozen, trying to process what she was saying. My parents were supposed to be here. I left them here with him at 5:30. Nick, the charge nurse, stepped forward, his expression a mix of sympathy and frustration. Sir, no one has been here with your son since about 6:15 p.m. We called the numbers in his file repeatedly. When we couldn't reach anyone, we implemented emergency protocols to proceed with the necessary treatment. I checked my phone, 17 missed calls from the hospital. In my rush to make the meeting on time, I'd silenced it and forgotten to check it during the negotiations. I called my mom immediately. No answer. I tried my dad. Same result. I called over and over, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. Where are you? Why did you leave Lucas? Call me back right now. I sat with Lucas, watching the ventilator push air into his tiny body, the fresh bandage where they drilled into his skull to relieve pressure. Dr. Rivera assured me they'd caught the spike in time, but just barely. Without the emergency procedure, he could have died or suffered permanent brain damage. Around midnight, still no word from my parents. I opened Facebook to post an update for friends who might want to know about Lucas. The first post in my feed stopped me cold. My brother Pete, surrounded by friends at Morton Steakhouse downtown, a 33 balloon floating behind him. Caption: Best birthday dinner ever! Thanks, Mom and Dad, for the surprise party. The photo was posted at 7:30 p.m., tagged in it my parents, both smiling, raising glasses in a toast, while my son was fighting for his life with a drain in his skull to keep his brain from swelling. They left to throw a surprise birthday dinner for Pete. I looked at their smiling faces in the photo and felt something inside me break, then harden. I stared at that picture for a long time, the pieces falling into place. They hadn't even bothered to call the hospital to check on Lucas. For all they knew, he could have died while they were ordering appetizers and singing happy birthday. The anger that rose in me was cold and clarifying. I took screenshots of the Facebook post, noting the timestamps, then closed the app and focused entirely on my son. Lucas remained unconscious through the night. The nurses came in hourly to check his vitals and the drainage from the ventriculostomy. Each time they assured me that he was stable, that his intracranial pressure was decreasing, that the antibiotics were beginning to work. I didn't sleep. I sat in the chair beside his bed, holding his hand. At 6 a.m., my parents finally walked into the ICU, like nothing had happened.
Hey guys, real quick, I hope you're enjoying the story. Don't forget to subscribe, it would really help the page. Thanks for supporting.
I was still sitting in the same position they'd left me in the night before, except now Lucas had a bandage wrapped around his head and a drain coming out of his skull. Dad spoke first, his tone casual. How's he doing? We just went to get some breakfast. My laugh was so cold it surprised even me. Breakfast? For 12 hours? Mom's face tightened. What's that supposed to mean? I turned my phone screen toward them, Pete's Facebook post still open. This is what it means. They both froze. Dad recovered first, his face settling into the dismissive expression I knew so well. It was just for an hour or two. Pete had been planning this for months. They drilled a hole in my son's skull last night, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He could have died. I wasn't here to consent because I trusted you. Mom straightened up. You're overreacting. This is a hospital, Dean. He was fine. There were doctors everywhere. But Pete's 33rd birthday, that only happens once. The words hit me like a physical blow. In that moment, I saw with perfect clarity exactly where Lucas and I stood with them. Pete's birthday dinner would always be more important than my son's life. Get out, I said. Now you're just being dramatic, Mom snapped. We helped you, and this is how you act. You've always been ungrateful. At least Pete appreciates what we do for him. Get out, I repeated louder this time. A security guard appeared in the doorway, alerted by our raised voices. Is there a problem here? Dad put his hand on Mom's shoulder. Let's go. He's always been like this, making mountains out of molehills. As they walked out, Mom turned back. Don't call us for help again, ever. Don't worry, I said. I won't make that mistake again. After they left, I sat back down beside Lucas, a strange calmness settling over me. Something had shifted permanently. The last thread connecting me to my parents had snapped, and, surprisingly, it felt like freedom. Dr. Rivera came in later that morning to check on Lucas. She examined the ventriculostomy site, reviewed his latest lab results, and adjusted his antibiotics. He's stabilizing, she said. The procedure went well, and the latest cultures show the antibiotics are working. But we're not out of the woods yet. We need to monitor him closely for at least another 48 hours. I nodded, too exhausted and emotionally drained to speak. She sat down in the chair next to me, her clipboard resting on her lap. Mr. Wilson, as Lucas's doctor, I need to tell you something. I looked up, bracing for more bad news. What happened last night was a serious case of medical neglect, she said, her voice low but firm. Your parents abandoned a critically ill child in the ICU without notifying the medical staff. If we hadn't caught the pressure increase when we did. She let the sentence hang, unfinished. I've documented everything in Lucas's chart, she continued. The time they left, our attempts to contact you and them, the emergency protocol we had to implement. If you want to pursue this legally, you have grounds. I stared at her, surprised. You think I should sue my own parents? She met my gaze steadily. I think what they did could have cost your son his life. I've been a doctor for 20 years, and I've seen too many children harmed because adults didn't take their responsibilities seriously. That's all I'm saying. After she left, I called Lauren's mom, Beth. She answered on the first ring. How's my boy? She asked immediately. She called every day to check on Lucas. I told her everything, the meningitis, the surgery, my parents abandoning him for Pete's birthday dinner. I'm on the next flight, she said without hesitation. Don't move from his side until I get there. My business partner Carl called next. I texted him about the emergency before the meeting with the Singaporeans. The deal's signed, I told him, but Lucas's condition is worse than we thought. The Singaporeans understand completely, he said. Mr. Leong called me this morning. He speaks very highly of you, said you showed exceptional character in how you handled the situation. They're fully committed to working with us. He paused, then added, don't worry about anything but your boy. The business can run without you for a while. We've got good people. That afternoon, a nurse came in with some paperwork. Are you Dean Wilson? When I nodded, she handed me a business card. This is Jason Mercer. He's the hospital's legal counsel. He'd like to speak with you when you have a moment. Jason was a sharp-looking guy in his 40s with a no-nonsense manner. He explained that the hospital had a legal obligation to report cases of child endangerment to the proper authorities. What happened with your son falls into that category, he said. The hospital will be making a report, but you have options too. He outlined what a civil lawsuit might look like, the grounds for negligence, child endangerment, and emotional distress, the potential damages I could seek, the process and timeline. Talk to your own attorney before making any decisions, he advised, but don't wait too long. There are statutes of limitations on these matters. By the time Beth arrived that evening, I had made my decision. My parents had shown me exactly who they were and where Lucas and I ranked in their priorities. Now I would show them there were consequences for that choice. Lucas spent 2 weeks in the hospital. The meningitis had been caught in time to prevent permanent damage, but his recovery would be long. He suffered from headaches, fatigue, and sensitivity to light and sound. Beth never left our side, sleeping in the chair next to his bed, organizing meal deliveries from friends. She was 65, with arthritis that made every movement painful, but she never complained. I'd worked out a system with my company. I'd go in for 2 hours each morning while Beth stayed with Lucas, then return to the hospital for the rest of the day. My project manager stepped up, handling job sites and client meetings. We didn't lose a single contract. Mr. Leong, the Singaporean investor, surprised me by showing up at the hospital one morning during the second week. He brought a hand-carved wooden robot for Lucas and insisted on rescheduling our planning meetings for after Lucas was discharged. Business can wait, he said simply. I've been where you are. 20 years ago, my daughter had leukemia. I almost lost a major deal because I wouldn't leave her side. Now that company is my biggest client. He handed me his card with his personal number. Call me when you're ready. The deal will still be there. When Lucas was finally discharged, we had a new routine. Beth moved into my guest room just until Lucas is back on his feet. 2 of my employees, Kevin and Marcus, started showing up weekends to help with yard work and house repairs I'd been neglecting. Kevin sat with Lucas, teaching him card tricks and telling him stories while I caught up on work. Marcus brought his kids over to play with Lucas once he was stronger, giving him some normal kid time. 3 months after Lucas came home, I met with Anthony Reeves, a lawyer who specialized in personal injury and medical negligence cases. I brought all the documentation, Lucas's medical records, the hospital incident reports, screenshots of Pete's Facebook post, and my phone records showing the missed calls from the hospital. Anthony reviewed everything carefully. This is a strong case, he said, but I want to be clear. Suing family is always messy. It gets personal fast. They stopped being my family the moment they walked out on my son, I replied. Even so, you need to be prepared. They'll likely claim you're the one who abandoned your son by going to a business meeting. They'll try to minimize what happened. They'll make it emotional. We filed the lawsuit the following week. Negligence, child endangerment, and emotional distress. We sought damages for Lucas's medical bills, ongoing care, and the trauma he'd experienced. The first court filing hit them like a bomb, Dad called, raging about family betrayal and how I was always jealous of Pete. You're suing us? Your own parents? Name one thing you've done for me in the last decade, I said. I'll wait. The silence on the line was all the answer I needed. Mom tried a different approach, calling in tears about how this would destroy the family and break your father's heart. When that didn't work, she switched to threats about how everyone will know what an ungrateful son you are. I didn't bother pointing out that was a price I was willing to pay. I simply said, see you in court, and hung up. The lawsuit dragged on for over a year. My parents hired an expensive attorney who tried to paint me as an irresponsible father who abandoned my child for a business meeting. But the hospital records were damning, and Dr. Rivera's testimony about the emergency procedure and my parents' disappearance was irrefutable. We had witnesses, nurses, the ICU receptionist who logged their early departure, even the waitress from the steakhouse who remembered them arriving for Pete's party, commenting on the sweet balloon arrangement they'd brought. The final nail was Pete's Facebook post, with the timestamp and photos, plus his own deposition, where he admitted knowing that my parents had left Lucas in the hospital to attend his surprise party. Did you consider asking them to stay with your nephew instead? Anthony asked him during the deposition. Pete shrugged. It was my birthday. The judge's expression during that testimony told me everything I needed to know. Throughout the process, Lucas continued to recover. The headaches gradually subsided, his energy returned, he went back to school, rejoined his soccer team, started taking karate lessons. But he never asked about my parents. We won. The judge's ruling was clear and unequivocal. The court finds the defendant's actions showed a reckless disregard for the welfare of a minor in critical condition. This is not merely a family disagreement, but a serious case of neglect that could have resulted in tragedy. The judgment, $750,000 for Lucas's medical bills, ongoing care, and emotional damages. The judge also ordered my parents to pay all court costs. My parents weren't wealthy, but they had equity in their house and decent retirement accounts. The judgment would force them to sell their home and liquidate most of their savings. As we left the courthouse, Dad approached me, ashen-faced. "You've ruined us," he said flatly. "I hope you're satisfied." I looked at him, feeling nothing. "No, Dad, you ruined yourselves the moment you walked out on Lucas. This is just the bill." The money from the lawsuit went into a trust for Lucas's education and future needs, with a portion set aside for any ongoing medical treatment he might require. I didn't want or need their money. I wanted accountability. 4 years passed after the lawsuit. Lucas, now 11, had fully recovered with no lasting effects from the meningitis. He was a straight-A student, played competitive soccer, and had developed an interest in computer programming. Beth had permanently moved to Indianapolis, buying a small house 10 minutes from ours. She came for dinner 3 times a week and had become the grandmother Lucas deserved. Kevin and Marcus remained close friends, our families spending holidays together. They'd become Lucas's honorary uncles, teaching him to fish, helping him build a treehouse, showing up for his soccer games and school performances. The contract with the Singaporeans had expanded to a $5 million annual business relationship. Mr. Leong and I had become friends, with his company opening doors I never thought possible. My business now employed 45 people and had expanded into 3 states. I heard through mutual acquaintances that my parents had been forced to sell their house and move into a small apartment across town. Pete's business ventures had all failed, and he'd moved in with them, still living off what little they had left. The court judgment had hit them hard. They'd appealed but lost. After paying legal fees and the settlement, they were left with minimal savings for their retirement. Dad had gone back to work as a consultant, but at 70, the opportunities were limited. Then, one evening, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Wilson, this is Mercy Hospital. Your mother has been admitted with a severe cardiac event. She's asking for you." I sat there, letting the words sink in. "I understand. Thank you for letting me know." I didn't rush to the hospital. Instead, I finished dinner with Lucas, helped him with homework and tucked him in. Then I drove slowly across town, parking in the same hospital garage where I desperately rushed with Lucas years before. When I walked into her room, Mom looked small and fragile, tubes and wires connecting her to machines. Dad sat slumped in a chair beside her, looking every bit of his 70 years. His head snapped up when he saw me. "Dean, thank God, we need your help." I said nothing, just looked at them both. "Your mother needs bypass surgery," Dad continued. "Our insurance won't cover all of it. We've exhausted our savings. Pete," he trailed off. "Pete can't help us." Mom reached out a pale hand. "Dean, I know we've had our differences, but I'm your mother. Please help us. We have nowhere else to turn." I looked at her outstretched hand, remembering Lucas's small fingers wrapped in bandages, the ventilator breathing for him while they ate birthday cake across town. "The surgery," Dad pressed. "It's $120,000 not covered by insurance. We can pay you back slowly once your mother recovers." "Like you paid back the judgment?" I asked quietly. Dad flushed. "That was different. That was you being vindictive." "Dean, please," Mom whispered. I stepped closer to the bed, looking down at her. "You know, when Lucas was lying in the ICU and they had to drill into his skull because his brain was swelling, no one was there to hold his hand. No one who loved him was there to speak for him because you chose Pete's birthday party over your grandson's life." Tears filled her eyes. "I'm sorry, Dean. I was wrong. We were wrong. Please don't punish me for one mistake." I leaned in close. "It wasn't one mistake. It was a lifetime of showing me exactly where I stood. And now you know where you stand with me." I straightened up. "You'll be fine. But Lucas's birthday, that's once a year." The shock on her face was priceless, her own words thrown back at her after all this time. Dad jumped up. "You heartless jerk, after everything we did for you." I turned to him calmly. "Name one thing, Dad, I'm still waiting." He deflated, sitting back down heavily. I walked to the door, then paused. "I'll have my assistant drop off a check tomorrow for $10,000, enough for a consultation with a cardiac specialist who can help you arrange a payment plan." "That's it." "That's it?" Dad asked incredulously. "Your mother could die." I looked back at them both. "This is a hospital. She'll be fine." Then I added, "Consider the $10,000 a gift from Lucas." I asked him what I should do, and he said, "Help Grandma a little, Dad, not because she deserves it, but because we're not like them." The next day, I had my lawyer deliver the check, along with paperwork releasing them from any future claims of financial support from me. At the bottom, I'd written, "This concludes our relationship. This closes our account permanently." That night, I sat on the deck with Beth, Kevin, and Marcus, watching Lucas play soccer in the backyard with Marcus's kids. "You okay?" Beth asked, squeezing my hand. I nodded, watching my son's face light up as he scored a goal. "Yeah, we're going to be just fine. For years, I thought family was about blood ties and obligation. What I've learned is that family is who shows up, not just in the happy moments, but in the hardest ones. Kevin, Marcus, Beth, Mr. Leong, these people who had no biological obligation to us stepped up when it mattered. I think back to that moment in the hospital sometimes, when the doctor told me they drilled into my son's skull with no parental consent because they had no choice. How close I came to losing everything that mattered. How my parents' actions could have cost Lucas his life or his future. Mom survived her surgery. One of my former clients is a cardiologist who agreed to do the procedure at a reduced rate after my $10,000 contribution. I know this because he called to let me know it went well, not because they reached out to thank me. Pete tried calling a few months later, asking for money. I blocked his number. He showed up at my office once, talking about a sure-thing investment opportunity. Security walked him out before he could finish pitching his next sure thing. Lucas asked me recently if he had other grandparents besides Beth. He was doing a family tree project for school. I told him the truth, that my parents were still alive but weren't part of our lives because they'd made choices that showed they couldn't be trusted with his well-being. Were they mean to you when you were little? He asked. Not exactly mean, I told him, just not there in the ways that mattered. He nodded with that wisdom kids sometimes show that floors you, like how Kevin lost his son but still has time to teach me stuff, and how Grandma Beth's knees hurt but she still comes to all my games? Exactly like that, I said. Last week I got a letter from my father. Mom had another heart attack and didn't make it. The funeral was being held at their church. He said Lucas and I were welcome to attend. I didn't go. I sent flowers with a card that read, "I'm sorry for your loss, because despite everything, there was a time when I called her Mom." The thing is, I don't regret walking away. I don't regret the lawsuit, and I definitely don't regret building a family of choice rather than obligation. Blood doesn't make family, actions do. I'm not saying what I did was right for everyone, but it was right for us. Sometimes the most important family lesson is knowing when to walk away.